Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the second part of my Historathon 2023 announcement. There wasn't going to be a second part until I realised there should be a second part. So, if you've been noticing on my community posts that I've been saying, oh, I'm putting up too many videos, I need to slow down because I'm outstaying my welcome, then I'm clearly not helping by putting up another one today. But I do think this is quite a useful one to do. And I noticed from the one I did yesterday, people are finding some recommendations in there and it's kind of sparking their interest. So I'm going to expand a little bit on what I said. And also, there's actually something that I really should have said that I had in my mind, and for some reason I forgot just before I was doing it, about some of the medieval stuff I was going to look at. Actually, just in case you haven't seen this first video, I'm just going to go over what that video was about before I start talking about it. So there's a big event happening, the Historathon 2023, and it's all about celebrating history, and it covers all kinds of history you can think of. So you can choose whatever you want to delve into, and it goes right back. So as I said, it's all split into quarters. So the first quarter goes from the year dot, so however far you want to go back, prehistory, and up to the year 500. So that's January to March, and then March through to May is the period from 500 to 1500. So there's a big chunk of sort of the medieval age. The Middle Ages, 1500. So 500 to 1500, and then you could just read one book if you wanted to. If you want to get involved, you don't have to think, oh my god, I've got to read constantly in this period all books related to those subjects. Not true. Read one book and you'll get involved, and you can join in the comments and the chats and or whatever. And then the third prompt, if you like, the third period is the period from July to September, and that's going to be from 1500 to 1820. So that kind of brings in the Industrial Revolution, and it's a different world by then, so it's quite different to the previous period, the previous prompt. And then the last 3 months of the year, September to December, is the modern age, so modern history. So you've got 1820 to present day, and I'm just going to go over some other things that you could read if you wanted to, because the first video I did yesterday, I didn't even think of it as being recommendations. I was just kind of saying what I was going to do. But just off the bat, the prehistory section, I'm going to read the Richard Dawkins book about evolution, which is called The Greatest Show on Earth, which I held up in yesterday's video, and a book about unbelief, non-belief, rejection of belief, atheism in the ancient world, which is really interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. That's called Battling the Gods. So I'm reading those two for definite. But one thing I thought about was, I've got an awesome book here, the Encyclopedia of Evolution. And I remember when I found this, I was like, oh, I've got to get this. This is awesome. But this is the kind of encyclopedia that you really have to deliberately read. You don't just nip into it. So what I mean is, for example, so this is one of my huge encyclopedias of science fiction, and I might think, oh, let's just find an example. This is really like stating the obvious. Oh yeah, I've just opened it up. Say you wanted to know when Stephen Donaldson was writing, then you could just look it up. And he was born in 1947, and he started working through the 70s and 80s. You got a big section on Stephen Donaldson here. First thing opened up, and you might look into that. You might pick this up and think, oh, I need to know about a particular author. But you're not really going to go, oh, I need to know about Glyn Isaac, who's a paleontologist or paleanthropologist, or insectivorous plants, I need to know about hybridization. Crossbreeding, that's the crossbreeding of species. The Great Dying. There's a section, the Great Dying. So, mass extinctions. You see, I think you're going to have to, with this one, deliberately read it. Dollo's Principle. See, unless you know what Dollo's Principle was, you're not going to read it. You're not going to find it. So I'm going to find it because I'm going to deliberately read it. So that is actually the Dollo's Principle, just quickly noting there, is the irreversibility of evolution. So yeah, I'm going to read this as part of the prehistory section of the Historathon. So if you find an Encyclopedia of Evolution and want to join me on that, cool. But moving on to a big part that I wanted to do in yesterday's video, for some reason I totally forgot. I want to talk about these. These books are very special. They were very expensive when I found them. Actually, these three were. This one not so much. This is a Penguin Classic. But these three were very expensive. And I am trying to build up a collection of the history of music and different analysis of music, because one day I want to do an MA in musicology, but it's just really expensive. But I'm just going to show you some of these things I found that I'm definitely going to use as part of the second prompt, the 500 to 1500 area. So that's the spring months. So I found this awesome book, the English Medieval Minstrel. So that's really detailed stuff. I've had a flick through, but not read it properly. Really detailed stuff about how the minstrels created their songs and what they sang and where they went, who they sang to, all that kind of stuff. And it's a really fully detailed history of the medieval minstrel, which is really cool. And then there's a really thick book with genuine kind of music notation, so proper music analysis of music in the Middle Ages. So this goes, so there's like stuff about polyphony in it, as well as some of the minstrel stuff and some of the religious songs, you know, that kind of stuff. And this is by Gustav Rees. And again, this was a bit of a find. There's a lute. The lute comes from the oud, by the way, and I have an oud, and I was very excited to have an oud, and I find it enormously intimidating. But at some point, I'd love to be able to learn a piece of music on the oud and play it to you. But it's still stringed up. My son's sorted it out for me, and it's the plectrum of an oud is really long. It's about that long. It's really fascinating. You have to hold it in a particular way. But anyway, all of the guitars come historically back to the lute, but before that, the lute comes back to the oud. So a little bit of information there that you might find interesting. But anyway, music in the Middle Ages. And then another one I found, this is by Richard Hoppin, Medieval Music. Again, a really, really, really detailed deep dive into the creation of music in the Middle Ages. And as I said, it's got actual music notation in it as well. So it's detailed in a musical way, music theory way, as well as more sociological way. So, I mean, just opening up these two pages, you've got Hispanic or Mozarabic liturgy on that page, and then here you've got Celtic liturgy there. And then the other thing is this Penguin Classic book, Medieval English Lyrics, from 1200 to 1400. So, because I think the 13th and 14th centuries are so interesting, I think it's just really fascinating the way people lived then, and it kind of is connected to my deep fascination with Robin Hood, which I mentioned in yesterday's video. But I think that period is really interesting. But yeah, you've got some medieval lyrics here, moral themes, and stuff obviously to do with Christ and the Virgin Mary and stuff like that. There's lots of lyrics about that. But there's also dancing songs, drinking songs, ballads, satires, and poems of wit, humour, and sexual innuendo. Innuendo is an old thing. And then the third period, which is from 1500 to 1820, there's some more stuff I wanted to talk about. So I did mention in the Voxer chat group that I might have even said it. No, I might have said it in Sean's. Yeah, I think I said it in Sean and Mark's live where they were talking about it. And that was that I mentioned that I did a unit on witchcraft, and I did mention when I did a live feed with Pax, hi Pax, we talked about the fact that she may have been interested in history books about witchcraft, and I was going to do a video on that. But just quickly, I mean, this is like a standard one that really does cover a lot of good stuff by Brian Levac. So this is kind of a seminal piece of historiography, really important history book, and it's the most important one that everyone had to read when we were doing that unit. You could spread out and do other things, find other things, but it was like you have to use this book as well because it's a standard. So this is a good one to look for if you're interested in the witch hunting thing. But if you're looking at history, there's nothing to beat primary sources. So I did talk about the primary. What did I talk about primary sources? And there was one of the books I think from yesterday, which had primary sources in there. But this is a fantastic source book. If you get anything that says the something source book, so I've got upstairs the Reformation source book. I've got the European Union source book. If it says source book, it's full of primary sources, and they're really good because obviously that's not been touched by historians' hands where they put their own interpretation on it. It's literally just this is the I don't know. It could be a letter from one person to another. It could be a court case. It could be just a table of a list of people that have died and what they died from, or it could be anything like that. This is obviously going to be about witchcraft related things, or witch hunting related things, but that's a really good book. So I use that a lot, and it's just any kind of source book's worth looking for. And I did mention that how much I am really fascinated. Always loved the peasant revolt of 1381, and this is kind of I should have mentioned this one really because it's but again I wasn't really thinking about recommendations. I was just thinking about what I was going to read, and I don't really need to read this again. But it is the piece of work, the book on the 1381 peasant revolt. It's the book on it. There's tons and tons of books on it, but if you can get it, then it's a really good one to read for the peasant revolt of 1381. And one thing I will do in the summer months, when we're looking at this period, I'm going to do a book just on the Civil War. So just on the English Revolution, the English Civil War, and just cover some books you could look at. And there's going to be a fair bit of Christopher Hill in there, it's got to be said. But this is another example. I did show one yesterday, England's Turning Point. But there's like God's Englishman, which is a really good book on Cromwell. There's a book of Cromwell's speeches. There's my favourite history book pretty much is The World Turned Upside Down. But this is a really good one, Puritanism and Revolution. Well, it's all about interpretations of the events of the English Civil War and the build-up. And there's a really cool illustration there, which is a very famous illustration of the English court. And then, if you want to go kind of sort of, I don't know, something that's a little bit more broad, a little bit more textbooky, but it is a really good book. The Cambridge history books are really cool from the Cambridge University Press, and this is the early modern Europe from 1450 to 1789. So this covers obviously all the European countries, and the religious aspects change, the economics changed loads, technology changes, the way the different countries of Europe interact with each other changes a lot, and it's kind of covered in this. Yeah, it's got it includes European colonies overseas and integrates religious, ethnic, gender, class, and regional differences. But yeah, any kind of sort of book that's more geared towards students is a really good thing from Cambridge University Press. They're really good. A couple of other books I was going to mention from the modern period, because my second year of my degree was really dominated by Russian history. I did tons of Russian history. That was deliberate. So I did the unit on Stalin, and I also did my special kind of, you had to do something called extended project, and I chose to do the Kronstadt Rebellion, which is a really interesting rebellion where the Russian Revolution had happened, and there was discontent with the idea of that whole kind of meet a new boss, same as the old boss thing. The Bolsheviks had some pushback against because they were acting like despots. Trotsky and Lenin always argued it was temporary because it was one of those things that had to take over, and then they had to sort out the enemies that were within, sort of thing. But then Lenin died, Stalin took over, and Stalin was a nutcase. So anyway, the point is, clearly the Kronstadt Rebellion is a really good example of how it all kind of started unraveling, because basically what they were expecting in Kronstadt didn't seem to be happening, and they were very unhappy about the revolution. And it's a really interesting thing because Russia was in such a bad state, and then this dramatic thing happened where they took out the monarchy, and then not that long after that, and also this is mixed in with the First World War and their own little civil war that happened, which was more dramatic really than the revolution. And then you get the huge industrialization and the complete reorganization of the agrarian culture by Stalin. And you know, Russia's 20th century is so dramatic. But anyway, on that note, these two books are really good if you want to look into this. So, Russia under the Bolshevik regime from 1919 to 1924. Richard Pipes is a really, really respected historian on Russian history, and this is a really good book to look out for. And Jeffrey Hoskin, Russia, People and Empire. Jeffrey Hoskin's done loads of Russian books, and I used him a lot, and he's really good, very, very readable as well. So sometimes history books are more for the students than they are for the general population. So there is it's the same as scientific books, that like popular science and more sort of academic science books. So there is going to be a difference in academic history books and more popular history books. So be aware of that, I guess, that the Richard Pipes definitely writes more academically, but I think he's quite a popular historian in that sense, as in populist historian. So you may have got some more ideas for that, but I just think there's so many ways you can delve into this, and there's so many areas you can look at, and there's so many we are looking at so many periods, but you can look at so many events that happened in those periods, and you know, there's just tons out there. So there we are. I hope that was of interest and some help, and thanks for some of the comments and encouragement with me doing this, because I've obviously bounced off the back of a few people announcing they were doing it, and it is clearly a big part of my own personal history, so it's good to bring it back into the fore again, and it'd be good to read history books again. And as I said yesterday, I'm probably going to end up getting back into philosophy as well because of it, but we'll see. But in the meantime, please make any comments down below about what you thought of those books, and if what you think of the idea of me doing a special video on the English Civil War, because I definitely want to do that, but we'll see if people want to see that. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.